Welcome to the Child Care Director's Chair, the podcast for bold educators who are ready to lead, grow, and shake things up in early childhood education. Whether you're a teacher eyeing that lead role, a lead stepping into leadership, or a center owner dreaming big, this is your space to grow with purpose and leave your mark. Hosted by heart-centered leadership coach Erica Sacoccio, each episode brings you real talk, actionable tools, and a contagious laugh or two, all designed to help you step into your next level with confidence. So pour your coffee, pop in those earbuds, and take your seat, because your leadership journey starts right now in the Child Care Director's Chair.
Hey guys, it's Erica here with the Child Care Director's Chair podcast, and today's episode is special because we're going beyond our classrooms and straight to the Capitol. We are joined with one of my good friends, Alyson Panzarella. Probably didn't say that quite exactly right, but then again, she's got a name like Sacoccio, so we're used to it. So she just returned from the NAEYC Policy Forum in Washington, D.C., where early childhood leaders from across the country gathered to advocate, to learn, and to speak directly with policymakers about the future of our field and what's really happening behind the scenes in those rooms. What conversations are shaping for our children in the future of childcare, and what it actually feels like to maybe sit across from decision makers and speak up for our children, our educators, and our program. So welcome to the show, Alyson. We are so excited to have a little behind the scenes look at what you learned, what you loved, and what you wish maybe might have been different.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erica. I'm so happy to be here with you.
All right. So tell us a little bit, give us a little bit. First of all, tell folks who you are, right?
Sure.
Not just a little guy picked off the street named Alyson who happened to go down to Washington. Tell folks a little bit about yourself, honey.
Sure. So I'm Alyson Panzarella-Girard. I'm the Early Learning and Policy Specialist at Rhode Island Association for the Education of Young Children, which is an affiliate of NAEYC. A little bit on the side, I'm also a graduate student at the University of Rhode Island pursuing my PhD in the health sciences. So doing some really interesting research about long-term effects of participating in high-quality childcare. So this was my 8th public policy forum, I think. I'm losing count, which is but also really, it's really crazy. And every year we bring a team of advocates. I act as the state team leader, so I organize the team, and we have 2 days of really intense, really empowering professional development hosted by NAEYC. And then we have a Hill Day where I make appointments with our congressional delegation, and we go to Capitol Hill and we meet with each of those offices, and we discuss a little bit about everything going on here at home and how they can help. This year, we really didn't have, with this particular Congress, we really didn't have a specific bill that we were advocating for. But we did talk about appropriations, which is basically the federal funds that are authorized by Congress that then trickle down to the states via something called a block grant. So this is the Child Care Development Block Grant. And when we think about it in the context of our state in Rhode Island, that funds the Child Care Assistance Program, which helps families pay for child care. And it also funds quality improvement and workforce development initiatives. In addition to that block grant, so in short, it's going to be CCDBG. We also brought a few Head Start teachers that are registered apprentices. So it was really great for them to meet women who work in the field who are advancing their own higher education attainment through programs that are funded by public funds, and just talk a little bit about what's going on in Head Start. In addition to those Head Start teachers, we had our deputy director, Marinelle Russo, with us, and just some additional teachers from the URI Child Development Center. So it was a really stacked team.
Yeah.
We also had a teacher from Brown Fox Point, and we had a graduate student from Brown University. So the team was really stacked with early childhood educators. The way that I talk about it is that I'm kind of like the bread of the sandwich, where I make the introductions. I say, hey, what's up? It's good to see you. Here's the people that I brought. And those advocates that really attended the forum and learned how to be an advocate really make up the meat of what we talk about. And then I come back in at the end and I make the more technical asks about all that alphabet soup and I kind of connect those stories to where that money or where that funding or how those problems could be solved.
Yeah, sounds cool. What was your biggest expectation going in, and did it match your experience?
Yeah, I think that I've unfortunately and fortunately, my background is in policy.
Mhm.
So I really had a sense for what to expect just kind of based on the current political climate and the current Congress. I think
Mhm.
one thing that I did not expect and I had to kind of adapt and adjust my expectations for was the fact that the president's State of the Union speech was the same day, our Hill Day. So that meant a lot of increased security around the Capitol, and you just kind of had to recalibrate and make sense of further walks and just buildings that are a little bit harder to access. And I think another way that you kind of adjust in real time is we were there for the big snowstorm that we got.
Yeah.
So Sheldon Whitehouse and Seth Magaziner were actually stuck here. Um, I was stuck there, but that's a different podcast. And
Yeah.
so we had to kind of readjust and kind of, get to with the team and be like, hey, like, I know we kind of sold this as time with these reps and senators, but
Mm.
the weather is keeping them at home. And then we also learned that because of the storm, some votes were rescheduled. So where we thought we had 25 minutes with a senator, we actually had 5. And their staff stepped up and kind of took the rest of the meeting. But in real time, what you kind of have to do is say, okay, we got to cut this agenda by 20 minutes and kind of really quickly think about, okay, he has this little bit of time. What is the most important nugget for him to hear?
Mm. Yeah, a lot of pivoting.
A lot of pivoting.
Sounds vaguely familiar. I think sounds a lot like childcare.
Yeah.
So walk us through like the experience. Like what actually happens at the Capitol during those meetings? Traditionally, when you have the 20 minutes, what does that look like?
Amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, you basically walk through the equivalent of like airport security. There is like a whole, you're going through a metal detector, your bags are going through a scanner. So it can feel really intimidating at the top. But I mean, once you get in there, the people that, I mean, obviously they win elections for a reason. They're very personable. And also their staff is just so open and welcoming. But I think the buildings are all marble and they're very beautiful. So I think there's a little bit of an anxiety spike when you see
Mm.
kind of where they work every day. And it obviously doesn't look like our offices or our
Sure.
early learning programs. So there's a little bit of a, oh my gosh, like this is really, really official. But once you kind of make your first pancake and you get in there, like it really becomes really easy. So what usually happens is I, as a state team lead, kind of thank them for the time. At the top, I am checking how much time I have with them because it's really unpredictable. And then I allow each team member to introduce themselves and talk about what they do for their work. And then we get into once we kind of have everybody in the room introduce themselves, then we get into the personal stories of early childhood educators in the field and how the increased funding or a bill that may pass could benefit them or kind of how they're currently struggling in that moment. There was a lot shared. I mean, they are closed door meetings, so like I'm not going to like come out and
Sure.
like talk about what they shared
Sure.
exactly, but themes were just about how they are struggling with what they're currently making. And we're really working to professionalize the early childhood education field. And we were talking about how every early childhood educator that we brought with us works a second job and how, these are working professionals and they deserve not a living wage, but a thriving wage. So there were a lot of themes around how the teachers we brought needed to work another job to make ends meet. We also spoke a lot about just needs in our classrooms that we're seeing. A theme that was coming up was just an increase in challenging behaviors
Hmm.
yep, everybody's going to nod. And I think that, though I'm not going to share details of what they were going through and what these children are going
Sure.
through, every
Yeah.
single one of us is experiencing the same stress and the same kind of issues in our programs where we'd like to see more funding come through. So we kind of shared all of these stories just about, and what was really touching was that a lot of the Head Start teachers are either Head Start parents or Head Start kids. And they were really living testaments to how wonderful that program is to that. So just really, and it's not all just discussing problems as well. I think that is what people want to do when they get their senator in front of them, is be like, here's all the reasons why I'm mad at you. It really was an opportunity to share the success and the joy and what is beautiful about early childhood education. Because what I remind them is that they don't know what they don't know. And sharing the personal stories really creates a human connection for them. When they think about these humongous, they're called omnibuses, they're like humongous funding bills that request appropriations. And now after this meeting, they're going to remember this teacher who shared this story about a child in her classroom and what they're dealing with. And those numbers now have more meaning. I'm so glad that, in particular, Representative Gabe Amo, who represents District 1 in Providence, after hearing a personal story, said, I'm never going to forget that. And I think that is like the real-time confidence boost that we all kind of needed. It's like, yes, this is for something. So while I don't get to say like, hey, this bill really excites us, this would change our field, I can say that, like, look, when they're thinking about these funding decisions, they will have a face in their minds and it's yours. And I think that's why this event is so powerful. I mean, right now we're working on the fact that some of them want to come visit these teachers and kind of carry on these relationships. And I think that, that's a success. And they have already emailed me to say, hey, I'm gonna keep what you said in mind when these sign-on letters come through. So basically, members of Congress write a letter requesting additional appropriations, and they're going to sign on because they remember these teachers that they met.
Yeah. I think, a lot of the conversation of, what y'all talked about is conversations that are happening in centers all over the country, not just at the Capitol. I feel like it would be really good for those that run the programs also make sure that they are advocating and getting up there too, because we love our staff and we absolutely agree they need to be paid a livable wage. But I am seeing centers closing left and right because the costs are crushing. And it isn't, obviously just the teacher salaries, just the cost of providing high quality care at this point is crushing with the rates and the tuition that we can charge. So something needs to be done to bridge that gap so that children can have these high quality spaces, and parents can have a choice of places that they go.
Yeah.
What issues seem to be getting the most attention this year in those in the
Yeah. Well, I will say this is a tough year. What's getting the most attention is preventing cuts and funding freezes.
Yeah.
This has been a really tough year communication-wise coming from the federal government. There were threats of completely eliminating the preschool development grants. And every state that has a preschool development grant uses it a little bit differently, but there was a risk of that being completely eliminated. So we advocates came together and made sure that didn't happen. There were also talks of completely eliminating a program called C Campus, which is child care means access for parents in school, or it's another acronym. Honestly, one thing, guys, is that the number of acronyms is insane, even for somebody that does this every day. I know what C Campus is, but I could not break that down for you again. Right? So that program gives grants to universities to help their students access childcare.
Okay.
There were conversations about that grant being eliminated, also conversations about cutting Head Start. So while it's not an exciting success, we are rising up and saying these programs are important. These programs help families. These programs help children. So we are making sure that those cuts don't happen. And that's a success that I'm going to take in this current context.
Yeah.
We also had to have the conversation around why freezing federal funds is dangerous. It kind of came kind of comes down in this conversation about, well, we're preventing fraud. States each have their own mechanisms to make sure fraud doesn't happen, and they're fine. We are not going to punish millions of providers by freezing every federal dollar coming down because of a couple of crazy kind of like out there accusations of fraud in one state. We're not going to punish all 50 states. So while it's not legislative advocacy that I'm doing, there's also judicial advocacy. So going through the courts to say, no, you can't freeze all this money. There's too many families and too many providers that rely on it. So there's success happening in that way that prevents those freezes, that prevents those cuts. What's also very prevalent this year is the impact of a bill called H.R. 1. Colloquially in the news, it's been referred to as one big beautiful bill by the administration. And what we really had to illustrate to members of Congress was how impacts of that bill will hit early childhood educators and the children that we serve. So one example of this is cuts to Medicaid. And we know that almost a quarter of children, I believe in Rhode Island, I'd have to get better numbers for you, but it's around a quarter of children rely on Medicaid, which funds IDEA services or early childhood special education services. So in our classrooms where we may receive support from early childhood special educators or early intervention, we are looking at a risk in 2027 of 75% of that, as we know it now, being funded in 2027. Congress needs to learn and understand how early childhood educators will be negatively impacted by reductions in services for the kids that they serve. It came up a lot that we're dealing with challenging behaviors in the classroom. We're looking at 2027 having a reduced amount of dollars devoted to services to help those children. And the same for SNAP, which is food assistance for families. There are many, one thing that came up a lot with our Head Start families is that, we are the consistent meals in their lives, and we are very concerned that additional food insecurity in these communities will negatively impact us. We also know that I think it's around a little over 40% of early childhood educators rely on at least one form of public benefits. So our fields ourselves could be negatively impacted by these cuts. So it really is our responsibility in our field to illustrate how that's going to look for us, and so that they have, again, the frame in their mind of our faces, our voices are also kind of being impacted. So we have to work with them to find other ways to make sure that these services are provided to children. So that could mean increased appropriations to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, so IDEA. We might need to increase funds there specifically to address early childhood special education and early intervention. So it's a lot of, please don't cut that. That's really working. It's a lot of, hey, this thing you did over here, this is how it's going to feel for us. And also, we've kind of had these lower funds and not really what we need for several years, and it's time to increase them.
Yeah. What would you say to folks that are looking at it as are some of the, and this is just, again, I talk to people all over the country. So this is really just a question, and you can pass if you want.
Yeah,
but what would you say to, no, I mean, this is a real conversation. What would you say to folks that say, well, is Head Start really truly necessary now with preschoolers being moved into public schools? Can't they get food there? Can't they get, the services, special ed services there that those options, 50 years ago were not available. Now they're available in public schools. Like, what are your thoughts around that? Or, and again, you can certainly pass, but do you have any feedback on that? Because I've heard that come up a lot in conversations.
Sure. Well, I think there's two things here. Head Start is a federal program. So when we think about, well, can't young children receive these services in public schools? Every state is going to have a different answer to that. And I think that's why standing on its own, Head Start is very strong. And I would also, kind of open it up to the fact that early Head Start is also an important pillar of the Head Start program. And I think one of the greatest benefits of Head Start is also the wraparound services that happen. So families have access to a lot of different services through Head Start. And I think that's why a federal program is so strong, is just because no one individual state is on kind of provide the
Know what you're
wraparound
saying.
guaranteed services that
Yeah.
Head Start is going to provide. I would also point to all of the studies kind of coming out around Head Start. One of them, of course, being the Perry Preschool Project. So we know that children that attend Head Start are healthier when they reach
Mm.
adulthood, are less likely to be incarcerated when they reach adulthood, have
Sure.
better health and education attainment. And so I love an evidence-based policy. And until evidence that strong is coming from other programs, I'm always going to be in Head Start's corner.
Yeah, yeah. And just before anybody comes at me, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I actually went to Head Start. My mom was a Head Start teacher, so
Yeah.
I do want to make that clear. But I'm just, again, as I travel the country, I do hear these conversations of, well, we're making this shift as a nation
Hmm.
to move our younger children into public schools.
Yeah.
The public schools, again, they're great. They're their place, but they're also not open year round. So
Yes.
then what does that mean for families in June, July, August? Like what happens then? Where Rhode Island and, the snow and all the things that come with scheduling of a public school versus a Head Start or a private
Yeah.
facility. So
Yeah.
those are, some of the sides that I see.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I feel like folks are like, our early childhood providers and educators going to be working with infant toddlers only at this point, so there's, just a lot of those kinds of conversations. And this is why it really matters for folks to get involved. There's a lot of like grumbling about like, are you
Hmm.
writing letters?
Hmm.
Are you a member of your AEY? Are you
Yeah.
getting these updates, right? Which is why I thought really quick, like when me and Alyson talked a few months ago, and I said, "Hey, I'd love to have you back on the show," because Allison's been on the show a couple of times. She said, "I'm going to the forum." I was like, "Great!" So we intentionally said, let's do it right
Yeah.
after you come back, so people can kind of get a sense of like what is truly going on, and how they can make a difference. Because a lot of times it's like after something's been changed, now you're mad. Well, get involved. There's a
Yeah.
reason why Big Mouth is always talking. You got to get involved. So if somebody's a childcare director listening to this, right? Maybe they're wondering like, what can I do? Or,
Mhm.
there's, I don't own the school. I just work daily. What do you say to those folks that maybe are in a middle admin position per
Sure.
se? What would you say to them?
Sure. I think you definitely touched on my first recommendation, which would be to join NAEYC, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and their local affiliates. Most states across the country have them. And I think that this work and this can be very isolating. You can feel really listless. It can feel like, oh my gosh, the weight of the world. I have, these 20 kids in front of me, and each of them have these individual problems, and you might not know the best way to help. I think that that's why joining a professional membership organization is really important, because it builds that community and it gives
Yeah.
you access to information, resources, other professionals that can kind of help you craft your message. But I think more broadly, there's you don't need to leap all the way to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. to make,
But you could.
but you could, but you could. And it's actually a lot easier than it seems. They're very personable, because I think the biggest takeaway would be you are an expert on your work. You are an expert on early childhood development and early childhood education. You know what the children in your care need, and they do not. They don't. And they, make decisions, and I'm not saying that they're not doing them blindly, but they heavily rely on constituents
Sure.
to make those decisions. So if they're not hearing from you, they don't know your experience and they don't know your problems. So, and I wouldn't say like you don't have to jump right to the federal government. This could be at the municipal level. This could be at the state level, or you know
Mhm.
what? Go right to the federal level. We're not drunk dialing our exes. We're calling our senators, right? If you got something to say, just call your senator and leave a message with staff, and it'll kind of reach the appropriate person and it'll make
Yeah.
it happen. I would also say that smaller government, like that all politics is local saying that is so popular, is really, really true. When I go to Washington, D.C., all I'm really talking about are those appropriations. So the dollars. They're not deciding how each individual state spends those
Yeah.
dollars. So getting involved with your local legislators, finding out who they are, your state's Secretary of State's website is where it's at. I think even more broadly, maybe you're not ready to contact them, you got to be registered to vote. You know what I mean? Like, voting is really like the best on-ramp to this,
Yeah.
and just kind of staying informed and knowing who represents you. And then on a very small scale, you could invite elected officials to your program, which I think is such an eye-opener. I love those visits so much. I've had an experience with a lawmaker who we visited a 3-year-old classroom, and right before lunch, the portrait paints itself. And he kind of like turns to me and he goes, like, God. I'm like, yeah, she does this every day. And here's what we know about her. And here's,
Yeah.
this is what this life is. So as soon as they kind of see what you're doing and like see the magic and the joy that you bring, like, I feel like early childhood educators are so magical and so like they love what they do and they're just pouring out from their soul every day.
Mhm.
That deserves to be witnessed by people in power because, like Representative Amos said, I will not forget you. And I think
Yeah.
that it really is that simple. When they see what you're doing and when they see how much parents rely on you, what a partner you are to parents, they won't forget it. And they'll be like, you know
Yeah.
what? She really deserves this grant, or she really, we really do need to, invest in this playground, whatever the case may be. And, individual congressmen like make small grants to and can write and, release funds. And I think that, the right projects will find the right legislators.
Yeah. What would you say it was your favorite out of the whole experience? What would you say was your favorite thing?
I'm beating a dead horse here, but it really is the verbal, I will not forget you, because it makes it so worth it. Like, I mean, when I tell you, like, I kind of have to like sit there and stare at the ceiling so I don't like cry during these meetings with like how open they are about their lives and
Yeah.
how much they love their kids and like how much they love what they do. And they wish they could just do only that and not work that second job. Or, they wish that the kids that came to them didn't show up without breakfast in their bellies and that they were
Yeah.
healthy and ready to play. Just the passion that they bring, I'm just like not going to forget their faces as they learned about
Yeah.
them. Like, those meetings are so powerful. And
Yeah.
I think as the leader, I think another highlight for me is over just 3 days, watching the change in first time attendees who
Mm.
might be very anxious and kind of maybe feel like, because the content is like, it's a little heady, it's a little in the weeds, but I'm here and I can help you and understand it. So like the day 1 attendee and the end of day 3, the
Yeah.
person who I can say to them, I was like, you just sat with a member of Congress. You can do anything. And
Yeah.
it's true. They feel like they can. They feel like they can do anything. So they're ready to come home and go to the state house. They're ready to
Mhm.
come home and make a phone call. They're ready to come home and write a letter, tell their parents like what they can do. And, like, I love seeing advocates, kind of blossom in that space. It
Yeah.
really is a fast track to becoming an advocate.
Yeah. I can remember my first time at the State House. You were probably 5 years old, Allison. I was so scared. I was so scared. Yeah, they were cutting CCAP from 5 levels to 3. And I went and testified, and it was scary, but no, I'm not scared of anything. But I was scared at first. It can be intimidating, but after you do it, yeah, it definitely feels empowering. All right.
It's the suits and the room. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
feel like they,
Well,
but
and
at
they're
the end
sitting
of the day,
higher
they
than
work for
you, and
you.
you're down there, and they're up here, and yeah, just
Yeah.
the grandness of it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a very intimate person. I love small groups and talking to people on on a personal level. So it's just the grandeur of it. All
Yeah.
right. So after attending the forum, as we wrap up, after attending the forum, what feels more urgent to you now?
I think story gathering, which it might feel counterintuitive, but I'm really in awe of how much a personal story has impact. So I would really love to spend my time hearing from more people, collecting more stories, and just amplifying additional early childhood educators and their work, because there really is strength in numbers in that way. And there's also like so much to do. There's so many angles that I couldn't even cover in 25 minutes where, one individual's story might paint a very poignant picture of that situation. And I just want to spend more time with teachers, learning their how it's impacting them. I think that one thing I'm always very careful of is it's very easy to lock myself in a room, shut the lights off, and read this legislation and kind of doom scroll and figure it all
Sure.
out and be like, where are we at? Okay, what does this mean? Okay, so this is happening over here. What can we do about this? I think that my call right now is to spend more time with early childhood educators and hear about impacts on the ground. I can postulate what the impacts will be all day long, but I want to hear more stories and I want to amplify more stories and I want to make more connections to decision makers.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. There's a couple of things I want to say as we wrap up. First, I really want to point out if you're not a member of NAEYC and your local state affiliate, please do so. I've had the honor of flying around to it in the last 2 years, going to so many of their conferences and meeting the folks that are running the groups, and they are amazing. And they all have stories. Some of them are advocates, some of them are center directors, some of them are lead teachers, just the folks that, college professors, the folks that are on the boards of these groups are, so genuine, really want to help you. They're really there to support you. So definitely be part of that group, right? You cannot do this alone. You can, but why would you want to? So definitely get some support and connect with professionals, not only the ones in your four walls, but outside of your walls. Secondly, I want to say, I'm going to give some shout outs to some of my favorite AUICs, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Mass, New Hampshire, Maine, Florida, Flacy. I love my friend in Flacy, and New Jersey. So those folks are part of our partnership for our early childhood empowerment conference. And I've met pretty much everyone on all of their boards. Again, really genuine people. So check out their website, find out what you need to do to be a member. And it's worth your time. And don't be afraid to advocate. Find out what's going on. Don't just look for the bad stuff. Look for the good stuff too.
Yes.
And do your part. Do your part in it. Whether it's write a letter, make a phone call, or if you're really brave, get your ticket to the Capitol. So that's it for today. Thank you as always for tuning into the Child Care Director's Chair podcast, Alyson. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Child Care Director's Chair, where we believe leaders aren't born, they're grown. If something sparked for you today, share it, shout it out, or pass it along to the next bold changemaker in childcare. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected with Erica Sacoccio for more real talk leadership tools and a whole lot of inspiration. Until next time, lead with heart, grow with fire, and always remember, the chair is yours. Now own it.